Eccomachine.net. You guys have seen them on the channel before. Probably one of the most well-known machinists out there doing suppressor-related items, as well as recores and jailbreaks and such. For a long time, I've wanted to get a can of theirs or a recore of theirs on my channel and in my hands to test. They're more or less the go-to for this type of stuff. There's not a ton of competition, honestly, in the Recore world. There's really only about 2 names that are actively doing Recores of any type. Echo's really the only one doing Recores where the sky is the limit as far as what they can repair. Some of the others are more just servicing sometimes just tube cans. Echo does jailbreaks, for instance, if you've got a Sandman or an older AAC can or whatever, and you want to get rid of that mounting system and switch to modern ASR, they're your people. Here you get to kind of see what I'm talking about. You've got different adapters, different repairs and such. He's got an excellent web page on Facebook. He's got an Instagram if you're not aware, and you can just see all the work he does. Not only that, but he does custom jobs as well. If you can design something and you want someone to build it, he's your guy, especially since he's very competitive, if not the best, when it comes to pricing, and has a head on his shoulders that can problem solve things. He'll take weight out of parts. He knows what the minimum thicknesses are for applications. There's literally no one else I would trust doing complex work that's out there right now like this that is in the general public. They also sell their Form 4 cans. You've more than likely seen them come across Facebook or Instagram before. They've got a good lineup of Form 4 cans, and they're at really attractive prices. Like right here, look, $500. So they make very good cans, budget friendly as well. Now, I took a kind of a backwards route to acquire a can from them. I had a 9mm can that I was unhappy with, and was like, okay, it's time to get this thing recorded. I sent it to him. I sent them to him a few months back. There is typically I told them no rush, but there is typically for them a wait list. You're going to want to go ahead, call, or email to get on it if you do have something you want to do. They don't want 300 cans sitting on their premises if they're not going to be working on them. So they contact you once they are ready to get you into your can into the system, and then from there, you've got about a month wait typically. Once it's they're easy to work with. They'll tell you yes, they'll tell you no if they can do it or not do it. They'll give you an honest to God time frame of when they can get it done, and it is what it is. So here is basically the can I ended up with after getting my Recore, the Phoenix TL. Now it's about 7.56-ish inches long was how mine came out. Now, here they have 1.3 as the diameter. My diameter is 1.37. I have seen them say 1.365 a couple times, so not sure if this is just a little outdated or they just forgot to put the extra decimal place here. But you basically get the idea. 11 baffles. We're talking 17.4. We're talking, now it looks like they use 12 in theirs, but for mine they've got 11. That also might be a typo because I have a hard time believing they've got 12 in there if you look at the construction when we get to that in the CAD. But their website's not too old, so I've actually helped them find a few things to fix, but I could be wrong. But anyway, this is basically it. 17.4 construction, gonna be extremely tough can, especially for 9mm, yet not that heavy. Now on the website, it looks like they're saying 29 dBs in a weighted dB of reduction. So what that means is shooting around unsuppressed, subtracting back from that. So do keep that in mind when we shoot this thing. on our metering day. We'll see just how accurate this website description was. Though there is a potential there that we have one less baffle maybe. But yeah, so just be looking for that. We'll see how accurate that is. Now, what it does not say if that is subs or supers or muzzle or at ear. So I'm not 100% sure there. I guess I could probably call and ask, but I don't think it really matters because at the end of the day, we're going to get the data and we're going to see how it does. What else do we have here we need to know? I mean, that's basically it. Came in, it looks like, at $549 on the website. Now, a Recore can be a little bit more, depending on the work, sometimes a little bit less. So, it just kind of depends, how much materials are used, how much time it took, how hard it was, especially if you're repairing something that was severely damaged. There can be quite a bit of extra work than just making a can from scratch. So here she is in all of her glory. I'm going to go over kind of just Recores in general, because I get a surprising amount of questions about this, and it's always kind of surprises me too how many people have no idea there's a Recore process you can follow. Any suppressor can be repaired. It just cannot do a few basic things. The engraving, like here you have this Dead Air Odessa, right? We've got this engraving right here. It has to be reused. So anyone can replace anything from about right here or behind it about right here, okay? So we can cut everything off here and everything off here and either thread in or weld in or do both. That's sometimes something that happens. An entirely new core, an entirely new back section if we need to. So depending where the threading or the engraving is too, that'll play a part. But just because it's here in the blast chamber section right now, doesn't mean we can't put it at the end over here or even in the middle if we need to. It just can't be replaced. It has to be there somewhere. Now, there are a few companies that have taken even a step further, like Energetic Armament and Liberty Precision, who have a welded on ring and such, but that's a whole different topic. But long story short, that's the main takeaway, is you just can't replace this portion right here. The other thing you cannot do is change the caliber of the can. So this is a 9mm can, it's gotta stay a 9mm can. The stamp, if the stamp is, say 8 inches long, we can't go past that 8-inch mark. Other than that, an FFL 0702 can pretty much do anything that they want, beyond, within the means of, machinability. So let's say I had this can here, this 9mm can, and I blew out a big hole in the side, or I destroyed all the cones inside, or damaged an end cap or something. I can send it in to someone like Eccomachine or Alva and have it fixed and replaced. So I had an older 9mm can, same basic diameter, 1375-ish, and it was time to get it updated. Plus, I wanted to get something from Echo in general. I had been talking about it for a while, and now here we sit. So I think you all could probably tell which part of all of this is from the original. I'm going to keep the engraving on the other side just because it's got my personal information and stuff. But and that's the other thing. They can add different features, like different engravings and different wrench flats and things too, as long as there's material there to work with. But basically, the engraving is on the flip side of this piece here. So we've got threads on this side, threads on this side. This was titanium, all right? So that's another thing. The base material, it can be a little bit of a limiting factor. If this was aluminum and we wanted to switch it to a full auto rated 5.56 can, and this was originally a semi-automatic rated 5.56 can, well, we're kind of stuck with that shitty aluminum, and it's just going to burn up and get destroyed anyway, which is why it was only a very light firing schedule can to begin with, right? So in this case, 9mm, titanium's typically perfectly fine. 17.4 is more or less bulletproof on 9mm. So, you have two options. If the materials are the same, or some materials like Inconel and 17.4 can be welded together, but titanium and 17.4 not so much. So, we just have two threaded together sections basically. So, all they've had to do is, they've had to chop the can, thread, and then make a new piece. This will be a welded course, 11 baffles. We're going to go over all the specs and what it looks like inside. But there you have it, double clipped. Hopefully you guys can see that nice. We've got basically a 60 with a radius flat, and then it goes radius then to a flat shoulder. We'll talk about that more in a second. We are limited in here by how much material we have to leave because of the roots of the threads. So that's kind of one of the few factors that was a little bit tough here. Eccomachine booster housing, it's gonna be a little bit tight. All right, so I ended up, I have like 5 different Eccomachine booster housings. So this one I hit with a little bit of emery cloth just to kind of get it a little bit smoother in there. But the first set of holes are gonna be occluded. Now, that's really not the end of the world, especially since we have the second set of holes. There's plenty of boosters out there that have no holes at all. For example, this one right here, So it's nice that we still have the venting. I could even possibly do another round of venting in the back. That would be kind of cool. And we'd probably pick up a little bit of performance out of this, doing that extra bit of venting. But for the moment, this is what we've got. So I'm going to show you what this looks like basically assembled. And then we're going to switch over to AutoCAD and we'll look at the full construction of everything and spacing and all of that. You can see we're roughly a touch over 7.5 inches. If you go to the back of the ring on the booster housing, we're not going to include the little bit of piston there. But yeah, it came out really, really nice, I think. Now, as far as the finish goes, you might be wondering what's going on here. I didn't say what finish I wanted. You could get moly resin from them, which is way better than Cerakote, I think, in my opinion. But originally he did the welded core and then left this the raw finish it was before and sent me pictures of it and asked, hey, what moly resin color do you want? And I was like, fuck it, man, just leave it raw. I don't care. I'm going to beat the shit out of it anyway. Don't waste your time. I want you to work on customers' cans, not my stuff. And he writes back, well, if people are going to be looking at this thing, I don't necessarily want to leave it raw because I had originally marked up with marker and stuff a few things thinking I was going to be painting it and not doing it the way I would do it if I was going to leave it raw. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, shit, man, I don't know. And he's like, how about I just sandblast it? And I'm like, sure, sandblast it. So sandblasted this. I actually kind of like how it came out. Initially, when he sent me pictures of it, I was almost going to be like, man, you know what, fuck it. Just go ahead and moly resin it so it's all one deal. But now in person, I don't know how well it'll bring on the camera. It actually looks kind of cool. So, and it's something different than the norm, black, FDE, just raw tie or raw 17.4, So I like a little bit different. Of course, the booster too with the black kind of gives it this interesting look as opposed to like if I had, one that was raw or any other color. So I'm pretty happy with it. We're going to see how it performs. I guarantee you it's going to work a lot better than what the original can did. And now that we've got all that said, why don't we go ahead and switch over to AutoCAD and we'll look at exactly what is inside of here. So here I have drawn up as best as I could pull dimensions from what I got and done a lot of backwards math and such. A representation of what the cone being used is before it's welded together. All right, hopefully that'll make more sense here in a second. Because you have to understand, once they're stacked up and welded together, we're going to lose some of this shoulder and such, okay? So that is why I have it modeled this way first. Now, what do we got, basically? We've got 0.45 spacing, static spacing. We've got, if we drew an imaginary line down the center here, And an angle like this here, we have a 30-degree angle and another 30-degree angle on this side. So that is what? A 60-degree included angle, which we've drawn, or typed I should say, right here. Now, the total tip size came in, and I know it's going to be a little hard to read. I typed it a little small, but it's right there. 0.430. And then the actual bore put into the cone came in at 4.12, 4.11 roughly. So what does that mean? More than likely, during the machining process, it's getting drilled 0.406, if I can write. And I know this too because I know how he does what he does. He'll make and have on the CNC the baffles made, and then when he gets to what bore he wants to actually put in, he'll then walk over to a manual lathe and he'll take a boring bar and clean up the bores so they're nice and concentric. So that's probably why, you know, he probably makes about a 3 thou depth of cut, giving you an extra, you know, 6 thou to the bore, coming in at 0.412. And that little extra bit of space too, especially when you're talking about commercial cans typically, is pretty common actually. For example, my Dead Air Odessa, the bore is all over the place, typically pretty big. You have to remember these places have to warranty this stuff, and the last thing they want to do is warranty cans and have to do recores under warranty. It eats into their cost quite a bit, and it's just a pain in the ass as well. Then you get a reputation for bad customer service or, you know, things of that nature. So if you can avoid it by opening up the bore a little bit more without losing too much suppression, a lot of companies will choose to do that. Or they will do a progressive bore, but that is more work for them as well, because then they have every single cone different when they can just make them all one thing, or wire EDM them all one thing. Okay. Now, on this guy, he chose a 0.412 bore, and it's the same throughout the whole stack. No progressive bore or anything like that. End caps, a lot of times you'll see a lot of suppressor manufacturers make the hole in their end cap pretty big. Same kind of deal. End cap strikes are so notorious, especially in pistol caliber cans, that they'll open up that bore a little bit even bigger. You'll see like 0.43, 0.438 sometimes. It is what it is. I get why they do it, but that's also one of the beauties of being a Form 1er is you get to build things to a little bit tighter specs. But anyway, that's what we've got beforehand. Now, the clipping. Surprisingly small clips. I know in his rifle stuff he tends to like a little bit bigger clip. Now he also tends to stick with designs from that he came up with from years ago, and not he's so backed up all the time, right? He doesn't have like a ton of time to put into R&D. You know, he put years worth of R&D beforehand to come up with a good product, and he's now just basically stuck with it. It is a double clip, so we're going to have two of this clip, but I basically made a box here to kind of represent what we've got. 0.185, so it's probably more like 0.1875. It's probably, you know, a typical end mill size, but it's just measuring, you know, it's a little bit hard to get in there and measure too. You have to understand that. So it's probably more like a 1.875. Then the depth from top to bottom, surprisingly shallow at only 150 thousandths of an inch. Very, you know, what's interesting is that it's very much so indicative of a very common original kind of older school Form 1 clip size. You used to see a lot of RSCs clipped this way. Now, that a lot of times was because people were they were getting feedback from Echo, talking Echo. Echo has been on the forums for a very long time. He's been kind of a go-to for a lot of Form 1ers on stuff. So it's interesting to see that the spec came out, literally nailed it. So anyone who's been around a while will know what I'm talking about. So once you stack those guys up and you weld them up, you're going to have about a thousandth of an inch or a tenth of an inch worth of shoulder left over. So not a ton, but not bad either. It's actually in some ways a little bit more because of how he radiuses the transition here. So I wasn't really able, of course, to get in there and measure the exact radius being used, but we do have a generous radius, and I like radiuses at this transition point. A lot of companies do not do that. They just make it square here. I think it's one of those little devil in the details type things that just, while it's not super necessary or anything, it does add strength, first of all, and it will help a touch of gas flow here too in this corner. And we don't get as much stress in this corner, and rounded corners are just stronger in general. The back side of the cone basically mimics the front side of the cone. You've got just a flat, you've got where your angle intersects, and you've got it radiused also in the back. So all in all, it's just a very well balanced basic cone. There's a lot to be said about this because the devil is always in the details, especially in basic cones. And it's from these basic cones that the current market has then taken and morphed them into more complex designs to try to squeeze ever more performance out of suppressors. So it'll be very interesting to see where this can ends up in relation to some of our more aggressively designed cans. I've gone ahead and done a simple kind of drop of the booster. Now the booster from here to here, that's what's going to be outside of the suppressor. It adds about 615 in length to the overall length, not including this little bit from the piston. You've got the piston represented here in white. It's going to be your standard silencer co-style piston. Those have a pretty wide mouth opening, one of the reasons we like them, and they have these pretty big vents inside here that do vent into this space in the housing. Now, for those who don't know, pistons, this is a moving apparatus. We've talked a little bit about this kind of stuff before, but when you have something moving like this, you have to have a way to seal these two moving parts. Now, you're going to get people who've never tried to do this kind of stuff before go, oh, well, make tighter tolerances and they'll seal. Yeah, it doesn't happen, especially in mass production. So typically you have a cap on the back here that then has an O-ring inside of it that rides on the body here, and that's why you grease up your piston and service it periodically. And that is what seals combustion gases from not exiting the back of the suppressor. And you do need to do basic maintenance on these seals, though typically they last quite some time. Now they are recessed in the caps quite a bit more than this. There's not as much of this being relied upon. It'd be more like this much of it. But yeah, you get the basic idea. Now, switching over to the blast chamber, like little section piece that we had to reuse, it's extremely simple. You've got little threads, here, and you've got threads here, threads here, threads here. This section is going to thread in here, and then our can section will thread in on this side. The overall length on this piece is 1.410. Once we slide this booster housing in, it's going to take up most of this, as well as once we slide this actual suppressor body into this as well. Alright, now we get to the meat of the actual can here. We've got a 1.370 overall diameter. You've got this part here. This is going to be the threaded part over here that's going to thread into our blast chamber section. Now, because of the roots of these threads, we have to leave this area here kind of thick. Echo's gone and taken the extra time to make sure he's bored out this area for max volume. So, again, details, as well as weight savings, even though it might not be very, very much here. we would have had our performance greatly hurt if we were to have taken this and continued it all the way to the base. We would have completely lost our shoulder. Other people who do this stuff for a living might have done it that way, but this is one of the reasons I like Echo. He makes sure to make parts not always the easiest, but the way they should truly be made. So that's a big shout out for him. Like I've already mentioned, the spacing is very basic, 0.45. We've got 11 total cones, and I mean, this is basically how they all stack. At the very end, you then have more or less like a flattish style cap that gets welded on. I'll show you that here in a second when I scoot this all over. But it's not really that complex here, plus our double clips. So there you basically have this. This is just, kind of, think of it sort of like a solid metal washer. There is a little bit of like a scoop feature on the back of his caps. But other than that, you're basically taking it and welding it to the core. You're assembling all this, pressing it all together, and then you're using a rotary setup that he has to then weld, around the circumference of each of these cones. You have to watch, though. It's actually a lot more difficult than it sounds. You can't build too much heat, or you start to warp this and get concentricity issues, things of that nature. So there's more to it than you probably realize. But if we go ahead and scroll down here, I've added the suppressor body now with our blast chamber section, so you can kind of see how that represents. And then here is the booster still not yet inserted into the tube. And then if we go all the way down here to the bottom, we've got what this all looks like when it's all said and done. 0.45 spacing on cones, 0.12 bore throughout. The overall length came into about 7.55-ish inches. What else? Oh, let's look at the blast chamber section a little bit closer again. We'll kind of scoot this over. So here's how it all kind of mates up. You've got from the edge here to the tip here, you've got 0.155, but if you go from the actual piston itself, that's going to increase about another 60 thou. So we've got lots of room here, even though our booster is a little bit occluded up here at the top, but the gas coming out of our muzzle over here does have a little bit of room to expand inside of this piston. It will then vent into this outer annular area, which is what's going to allow this piston to move backward. And we have plenty of room, clear lanes of exit here on our first cone. And then after that, it's off to the races with a bunch of single-spaced cones. So yeah. Now, if you guys want to see what this looks like when these cones are all stacked up and clipped, we can do that real quick because that's probably one of the more important things. So at the 0.45 spacing we've got here with these 60s at the clip depth that he came up with, and my more or less basic flow calculations, we're looking something like this. It's actually not too bad, though we do look like we have a little room here to have gone a little bit deeper if we wanted to. Now, we wouldn't be able to go as deep as I typically do. You'll see me go sometimes, 220s, 230s, even on 9mm. Now, it also depends single or double clip. Now, if you are going to clip kind of shallower like this, typically a double clip does end up giving you better results. So I can see how this could be good. I do think there's a little bit left on the table here, though. And if it would have been me, and I was using this same spacing, and the key here is this same spacing, I would probably be at like a 185 depth of clip. Now, single clipping at a shallow depth like this could end up giving us a little bit more back pressure than we want. So then we would then revert to either a wider clip at that point, or switching to the double clip like Echo has chosen to do. So this is where tighter spacing kind of gets tricky. You have to kind of think a little bit outside the box, or you end up losing a lot of gas out your bore, or just not getting enough out of your clips in general, or shallow clipping and getting a situation where you end up making the can have a much higher restriction rate or lack of flow through, and then you end up getting more port pop from the firearm in question, whatever you're using. So, yeah, I mean, I would like to have clipped these just a touch deeper, but not by very much, and still nowhere near where we a lot of times end up in many other cones. So that basically wraps this one up. Thank you guys for tuning in. I do plan on getting the metering video on this out this Friday. I'm working on a couple other 9mm related things, as we haven't done 9mm in probably 8 or 9 months, I think. So I'm looking forward to doing it because it's a fun round to shoot. All right, guys, we'll see you next time.